Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. You know, folks, when we covered the story, of course, in San Bernardino and of that horrible tragedy in the desert, we called it rather early that we felt that it involved drugs right away. And then as we're learning more and more about the San Bernardino area and how prevalent what they refer to as marijuana grows, how prevalent that is, it was amazing to me and baffling to me that the press didn't understand what was going on very early. For days and days and days, they were reporting this as basically no information, and they were baffled by this. This was a mystery. But this area has a huge problem with, they refer to as marijuana grows, which are illegal marijuana fields, underground fields, hot houses filled with marijuana. And the Sheriff Dykes went over how many search warrants they had done, over 400 in a 365-day period in 2023. And the amount of marijuana they had seized and the amount of money, I believe it was over $360 million was seized. So under that playing field and realizing how profitable the illicit marijuana trade is, we're going to discuss tonight Proposition 64, which is a law that was enacted in 2016 that made marijuana legal in the state of California. And that's fine. Everyone here, I don't think anyone has a problem with people smoking marijuana or medicinal marijuana or whatever they're using it for. But it's really not a drug that is harmless or has harmless side effects or unintended, let's put it this way, unintended casualties to the marijuana trade. And we'll get into what some of those unintended problems are and what can be done about it. And how, in these situations, it seems that legislators never check in with law enforcement and to say, oh, what should we do here? And they just do it, and it creates some big problems. And then they're like, oh, well, it seems like they'll never undo legislation, because that's almost admitting that you failed, that it was a loser. So they'll live with the problem, and it gets piled onto law enforcement, and law enforcement has enough problems to deal with. Anyway, we're going to get into that tonight. The danger in the desert. Illegal marijuana grows in San Bernardino desert, and we're going to talk about that and some of the problems that it's risen. So hold on to your seats, guys. Get ready to enter real crime, true crime from a police perspective, and of course, off the cuff. And you're entering the Police Off the Cuff zone.
There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch Michael by there.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger.
So joining me tonight is retired NYPD Sergeant, Professor of Criminal Justice at Albertus Magnus College in Connecticut, attorney, and yes, I'm talking about Professor Michael Geary. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, Billy. Good evening. Good to see you, and welcome everyone to the show.
You know, Mike, I'm glad you're joining me tonight, or else I would have had to take on this whole assignment all by myself, because Phil's not available tonight. And, you know, sometimes when we have the dynamic three, it's a little easier than the dynamic two. And it's even more difficult when it's just me, the dynamic one, doing
Right.
this. I don't know how I just gave myself that name, but or both of us. Anyway, Mike, let's talk a little bit about, everyone. It seems, and I'm not going to say everyone because nothing is everyone, but with the legalization of marijuana, many states have enacted it. California being one. However, there were some unanticipated problems with the legalization of marijuana. And we're going to get into that now. And I wanted to ask you about specifically in California, they call it Proposition 64.
Right. Yeah, Proposition 64 was California's own state attempt to legalize recreational marijuana. It didn't apply to like cartels or anything like that. It applied to individual people who wanted to use marijuana, for recreation, or maybe they wanted it for medicinal purposes, for glaucoma or cancer or something like that, to alleviate some pain. And a lot of people didn't have a problem with that. However, and they thought the goal was that you would have legal dispensing of marijuana through storefronts, and these people would be regular business people, and they would pay taxes, so there'd be tremendous tax revenue coming in. State of California thought it would add $1 billion to the coffers. However, like all other social experiments, there's some good effects and there's some bad effects. As you said, Billy, there's some good effects, but there's the law of unintended consequences. All the times that you think something good is going to happen out of some proposition or some public, project, there's always going to be the things that, in hindsight, you go, "Oh my God, I didn't see that. It's happened." And so it started in 2016. It was a voter referendum in California, which is really terrific because it really gives the voters, not just the politicians, the thought about what we should do. And it won not by a landslide. It was a 57.5 to like 42.5 margin, but and it's been in existence now for since 2016. And under the law, it specifically it decriminalizes the recreational use of marijuana. And residents can actually harvest and be kind of like have like 6 plants, just a few plants you'd have in your backyard, whatever it is, that sort of thing. You can give people, which would normally be a sale under the old laws, you can give people marijuana, a certain amount. And part of what they wanted to do with this was to not only decriminalize it and take away the stigma of being arrested for this, but they would wipe the slate clean for many people who had previous convictions that and these convictions for narcotic offenses may have hurt them finding a job. And it would take away the stigma for juveniles who had been arrested, so they wouldn't enter the workforce and come of age and not be saddled by a previous conviction for marijuana. Great goals, Bill, but it just did not work out the way everybody planned. Some people it helped, but a lot of people it hurt.
Mike, I haven't been in New York City in a while, but people tell me that when you walk around the streets of the city, all you do is smell weed all over the place. And one of the questions, of course, and in Proposition 64 in California, is that the employees cannot be fired for a drug test, for a positive marijuana drug test. However, and I don't know how they test for this. They're allowed to recreationally use it when they're not working, but
Right.
they're not supposed to come into work, of course, high.
Right.
Now, how is that? How is it to police that? And I use the word police it because human resources people or supervisors or people that are in an employment boss capacity, how can they enforce that? Now, we also recognize that there's certain professions, of course, there is still drug tests and they can
Sure.
fired, probably police,
Fire, EMS.
fire department, operators of heavy equipment, operators of common carriers, trains, planes, automobiles, things like that,
Right.
doctors, nurses, things like that. still, I think, are subjected to
Right.
random drug tests.
Yeah, Billy, by decriminalizing, the possession, the use, or even giving, use for yourself and then also giving to some other people, you decriminalize that. Therefore, having the marijuana, smoking it, using it, it's not illegal. So if somebody's a secretary in an office, somebody's a bank teller, um, they could actually use marijuana before they come to work. They're probably not going to be allowed to use it actually while they're working, but they may have some effects from it. Maybe they go out for lunch and on their lunch break they smoke marijuana. Um, and this is what you know police have talked about. If you do these sorts of things without consulting what the effects would be on the public, you end up with these terrible problems of people driving around high, buzzed, figuring they can beat an alcohol breathalyzer test because it won't, the marijuana in their system won't show up. But therefore you can decriminalize something for some people, and that's wonderful, and people could maybe use marijuana without penalty. But on the other side of it is you're allowing people to get high, and now you take it to, as you say, business. Human resources is going to have a hell of a problem. What happens if you have people who are actually working in sales, and working with the public, and they're high? They're not. It's like, to me, it's like the same as being slightly tipsy and not sober. They're not going to be at their best in their job, and if they engage in any behavior that may be the result of being buzzed or high, including driving. If say that people have a company car, if they're buzzed and they get into an accident, it would be considered really the same as being drunk and driving. There is so many problems. It opens up a huge can of worms that perhaps the politicians seeking reelection and some votes and some popular press, they don't have to deal with the problems. The police have to deal with those problems on the
Right.
street.
Absolutely.
That's it.
According to the NBCI team in San Bernardino, in the summer of 2021, the I team toured the high desert by helicopter with the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department and spotted greenhouse after greenhouse, and you see a picture of that on the screen, that law enforcement said housed illegal marijuana grows, both big and small. From the air and on the ground, the sheriff's marijuana enforcement teams, or MET, are busy trying to eradicate these illicit operations. It's painstaking work, spanning hundreds of thousands of acres. Armed with search warrants, bulletproof vests, and clippers, the Met targeted 8 different illegal grows on the day that this NBCI team shadowed their operation. Deputies chopped down plants in all stages of development and estimated those brought to maturity could be worth $1,000 apiece. San Bernardino County Sheriff Shannon Dykes spoke about the recent work of the Mets. We've unleashed a plague in California, and the plague is the black market of marijuana and certainly cartel activity. So we weren't making that up when we brought it up the last time. Many people said, oh, it's 150 miles from the border. Well, cartels have cars. They have planes. They have helicopters. They have boats. They can travel. This is fertile land for them to cultivate marijuana and to get cheap labor and sell illicit marijuana. In the last year, the marijuana enforcement teams served a total of 411 search warrants for illegal marijuana grows, and we're taking just a 365-day period, said Sheriff Dykes. They discovered 14 honey labs, recovered 655,000 marijuana plants, 74,000 pounds of processed marijuana, and $370 million during that period of time. This black market is big business, with new illicit operations sprouting daily. Deputies told the NBCI team, scouts in the area spread word about the sweeps, and we encountered only one person on site the day we followed along. So they were being tipped off about these sweeps. The I team spotted the drilling of illegal wells, endangering the already limited desert water supply, along with open chemical pits, dangerous pesticides, and the illegal trucking of water. So these are some of the unintended casualties of the illegal drug trade. And again, California has a problem with water,
Right.
and here's these illegal marijuana farms drilling into the ground and taking the water supply from other agricultural needs in the desert and growing an illicit product and undercutting the government in price, because guess what? Theirs is not subject to a 15% tax. Mike.
Yeah, Billy, they unleashed, this is a self-imposed, shooting yourself in the foot scenario. They was sold to the people of California, and unfortunately it passed. It was sold as a bill of goods. We're going to be more enlightened towards marijuana. We were going to make perhaps they projected, and this is how they sold it, there's going to be $1 billion in tax money coming into our coffers that'll help keep your taxes lower, because we're going to make money off of this. We're taking out the profit incentive for people to sell marijuana on the street. We're going to have people sell it legally, and we're going to be taxed on it. It'll be like a storefront, a mom and pop storefront, and we're going to make a lot of money. We won't have to spend money on police overtime, doing drug sweeps all over the place, and putting people in jail and ruining their lives and their future for a sale. No, that's how it was sold, but it's a joke. It's hurting. It's destroying the land out there with the chemicals and the illegal wells, and lowering the ability to use the water other places. Remember, that area of California, they don't have water. It all has to come in, like probably 80% of the water comes in from Nevada. And you know how many issues they've had over the past decade with the lowering levels of water in Hoover Dam, all that area. And it gets that water in Nevada supplies 4 different states. And now you're going to have these clowns coming in and tapping into it. Then they're using electricity, a lot of electricity, because you got to have these hot houses, and they got to be covered, and they're using those. And so you're really not saving in law enforcement, A. B, you're not saving, you're not getting tax money, because you're getting some, but nowhere near $1 billion. There's nothing the government can do that could undercut private industry. And these guys will sell the marijuana as cheaply as they can to the public. They'll cut the legs out from underneath, perhaps real law-abiding people selling marijuana according to the law, because they can probably sell it 33% cheaper. And so therefore,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's turned into it's a self-imposed shoot yourself in the foot scenario. It's a nightmare for the people of California.
Lady Guinevere from the chat. Me and my dog got a contact high tonight when we went to pick up my husband up from work. Person driving beside me was blazing up. A cloud of MJ floating out the window and into mine. Lady Guinevere, I can appreciate that. When sometimes in our work as police, we'd have to go into drug apartments. And I remember one time I went to this apartment, it had about, 15 to 20 pounds of weed in it. And we all felt like we got a contact high. So we all had to get exposure numbers,
right?
Because we get drug tested. So if we got tested the next day, there was a potential that we had marijuana in our system. So we all got what's called an exposure number, so that if we did get tested, we could explain it. No, we weren't smoking. We were just got a contact high from being in an apartment with about 15 pounds in it. And Jeff M. from the chat, these illegal row operations will definitely harm the surrounding environment and the ecosystem. No doubt, but they don't figure this stuff out until it's too late. For folks that are listening and watching, the landowners in this were Chinese. So Chinese people are coming over here, buying up the land in this country, and then leasing the land to illegal marijuana growers. I can't imagine the rent they get for it, but that is what is destroying our country. And when we mentioned this, the last show, this has nothing to do with the cartels. This has nothing to do with the border. Oh, really?
Right.
How did these people get in from China, buy land in San Bernardino desert, lease the land to illegal marijuana growers and probably run it extremely efficiently. This is something that will destroy our country.
Billy, the stuff that they're doing, we've seen this. You've seen this in Manhattan, and I've seen it in the Bronx. You know, this is a serious industry. This isn't just like, well, people are going to get high. We're all going to be like love children from the 60s. No, this is a cutthroat, ruthless business. These people are serious. They don't care if they destroy the environment. They don't care if they destroy the water. They don't care what they do. It is all about the money, and they are just as ruthless as people dealing in cocaine. You've got these marijuana cowboys coming in, and they're illegal. They've been here in the United States, and all they're doing is engaging in criminal activity of one sort or another. In this case, it's marijuana. The landowners know what's going on, and by the time you go to court and the district attorney seizes that property, you know, it's the cure that it's put forth by the district attorney is going to be a long time in coming. What are you going to do? Try to seize every single parcel of land in San Bernardino County that's privately owned, when a small area could house, thousands of marijuana plants? We're not talking about a cornfield that's, 1,000 acres in Nebraska. You could have a small plot of just a few acres or even an acre. So it can be very hidden, very much hidden. And sadly, it was sold to the public as a bill of goods, and the public is paying the price for it.
100%. And, someone just in the chat said, Beaverforden, C-A-B, I hope I'm saying your name right, Beaverforden, is a high school teacher. I'll put it up on the screen. As high school teachers, we walk into clouds of marijuana periodically. And, I taught college for 10 and a half years, and Mike still does. Sometimes I would go into my class, I could smell the weed
from some
on people's breath that had just smoked outside. And, it's really not a good way to go through your education, to go through class high. But it was, and maybe they felt they had to be high to come to my class. I don't know, but I tried to keep them laughing, But it was, it is an epidemic even in that way. Mike, one of the things I've noticed, there are some states where the governors of the states have refused to allow their land to be purchased by Chinese nationals.
Right.
Because they've been buying up farmland also to try somehow, and I don't know if it's the great conspiracy, but to buy up American farmland. And I don't know specifically what their purposes are for that, but that could give the Chinese a stranglehold on our food in our own country.
Our food supply.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, they also, I think, one of the biggest exports we have to China is beans, and because it's cheap source of protein, and a lot of our farmers, that's a huge cash crop for them, and we have developed beans that are much easier to be raised, harvested, and last longer, and actually are more nutritious. And so there was I saw a special on TV about this where the Chinese are trying to get our beans, bring them to China, and try to figure out, going backwards, figure out retroactively how the beans
reverse engineer it.
Yeah, thank you. That's the term. Yes. Exactly. Reverse engineer it. And it's like, and so maybe they're buying up land here to see how we do things. How do we get the crops that we get? How do we get the yield that we get? How do we get the crops that are, insect and free, and last longer? Yeah. And it's very, very scary. And when you hear that they're buying up land near, defense installations around the country, it's a concern. It's a real concern for people.
100%. And of course, it leads to this. This is Sheriff Dykes. That they recently, of course, had that, what they refer to now is the massacre in the desert.
Kind of give you a little bit of backup and talk a little bit about the region and what we've experienced out there in that region. So And one thing that hasn't been mentioned yet, we need to remember that even looks like maybe the victims might have been involved in some level of criminal activity in this. We still need to always acknowledge the human perspective of this. And there are true victims in this. And as a result of what's going on in that area, to answer your question, in the last year, our marijuana enforcement teams, they served a total of 411 search warrant for illegal marijuana grows. And this is, we're just talking a 365-day period. Discovered 14 honey oil labs, recovered 655,000 marijuana plants, 74,000 pounds of processed marijuana, and $370 million. During that period of time, our team served 11 search warrants in the immediate area where the murders took place. And they served approximately 40 search warrants to the west of that area that we call the Shadow Mountain area. So this is an area known for illicit marijuana. Does that help you a little bit? Okay. Any other questions? Yes. Yes, absolutely.
And this was related to an illicit marijuana grow?
For all intents and purposes, it looks like illicit marijuana was the driving force behind these murders. And that's all we really know at this point. And I think we need to acknowledge really, why we're here and why are we talking about illicit marijuana. And as you said, this is legal in the state of California. The reality is Proposition 64 in the fine print took illicit marijuana and moved it from a felony to a misdemeanor. And the reality of this is by allowing that, we've unleashed a plague in this California. And the plague is the black market of marijuana and certainly cartel activity and a number of victims that are out there. And it's certainly my hope. I'm seeing a number of legislators change Prop 47 and some things we're concerned about. I hope they take the same view of Prop 64 and change this so they give law enforcement a fighting chance to put some teeth into this law and to take back and prevent a number of these homicides and other things that we see occurring.
So
If we don't fix that, we're going to continue to do this. I gave you stats for just the past year, but prior to that, thousands of marijuana grows that we've taken out in partnership with the Bureau of Cannabis Control, with partnership with our other state partners and federal partners. But right now, folks, we have gotten a much better control over this. But it's interesting. I just read an article that was produced back in 2020 in Cal Matters and what the supporters were saying about Prop 64. And it said it would bring the state's booming unregulated recreational marijuana under the rule of law and protect consumers and the environment. And its recognition of decades of prohibition against aggressive enforcement in criminal laws that don't work. That's false, 100%. Our environment, we prize our environment in this state. You go look at our deserts. It's hoop house trash that's left over. A very small water source that's available to the public has been tapped into. Look at this law through the lens of this case and all the statistics that I gave you. And then please research the other counties across the state of California. They have the exact same problems. We need to prevent these types of senseless murders from happening, and we can do it, and we have it in our power. We just need to make an adjustment. The police are not going after people who are smoking marijuana recreationally. It's illicit marijuana, and everything that Prop 64 was promised may possibly occur if we could just simply make that adjustment and change the way that we handle illicit marijuana in this state. Rob?
I know you don't want to say it's cartel related just yet. Is it fair to call this organized crime?
Rob, yes, it is. And look, based on our training experience, all of you hired experts that have also been talking about this case until we got to this point of the press conference. Based on our training and experience, we believe a lot of these things are occurring that are maybe related to much bigger things going on. The reality is factually at this point of the case, I can't tell you that, but it certainly looks like it has a lot of the modeling of cartel cases and things of that nature.
Another question, the person who called 911, is that the body that was found like 100 yards away or 200 yards away, the one that was found kind of away from the primary scene?
Mike, can you answer that, please?
Yes, we can say at this point that that was.
one of the things, we'll get back to of course, the murders. And these are the 5 individuals who were arrested for the murders of the 6 people in the desert. It seems like many people do not want to use the word cartel or organized crime or illegals or the border problems. And that's what this is. That is the reality. That is what this is. And you notice, I think this sheriff is very brave. He speaks right out and says, look, this is the nature of this problem. Yes, it's organized crime. Yes, it probably is cartel related. They don't have specifics right now, but directly or indirectly, it's related to the cartel trade. I'm sure these 5 individuals on the screen, Antonio Baez Duarte, Mateo Baez Duarte brothers, Jose Nicolas Hernandez Sarabia, Jose Gregorio Hernandez Sarabia, 2 more brothers, Jose Manuel Burgos Para. I'm sure not a single one of them is a citizen of this country. So they're coming into our country to commit crime and commit, in this case, 6 murders. And what are we doing about it?
Billy, if people aren't willing to just look this in the face and call it what it is, if you're not willing to acknowledge that there's a problem, then you're not going to solve it. It becomes ideology over common sense. That's what Proposition 64 was all about, and the sheriff called it out. It's ideology. We're going to make the world a better place for people to use marijuana so they can get it, and so we could regulate the unregulated marijuana trade and bring it into compliance with good standards and reduce the effects of marijuana use in the criminal justice system. That's nice. Okay, that's ideology. But the common sense, the cop can tell you the moment you decriminalize something, you unleash other forces that you're not even thinking about. And, there's way too much money in the marijuana trade for there not to be violence and murder. There's just way too much money. In organized crime, there's people get killed, gamblers get killed, people, pimps get killed, drug runners get killed. I've seen people killed for losing 1 kilo of cocaine. Their life isn't even worth 1 kilo of cocaine that would sell wholesale for about $40,000. You get truckloads of marijuana that's worth a lot more, and people's lives aren't worth that much. So there's a lot of violence that is endemic to the marijuana trade that people don't want to even acknowledge exists. And that's the sad part.
That is very sad. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, then you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed to us, go on to YouTube, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, share us with your friends and your family, and number 1, subscribe. And if you want to contribute to us financially, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels, and we also have a YouTube channel membership with, count them, 5 different levels, and that's true crime, real crime from a police perspective. Yeah, I think this sheriff is brave. And when, before we covered this story, I didn't know that much about San Bernardino, California. And in the days after these 6 murders in the desert, it seemed like the press was ignorant to everything. Like there had been no past. There had been no experience with things like this. And they were reporting for the first few days, like, we are baffled by this. This is such a mystery. And we said right away, no, this is drug related. This is a drug hit, or this is a drug deal gone bad, because whenever you see unbridled violence, such as we saw in this case, you can bet it is drug related. It is drug deal. And the fact that they set 4 or 5 of the bodies on fire, that's all you needed to know. But yet the press waited like 5 or 6 days until the police announced an arrest to say, oh, it was a marijuana deal gone bad. And initially the police put out there that the way they were notified of this was a wellness call, which was total nonsense. And we called that too. We said there was no wellness call. If someone called, the person that called either knew about these people going into the desert to do this deal and they never came home, and they made a call. However, what actually happened was one of the victims who got shot, he called prior to dying. He called, and that's how they triangulated his cell phone. They flew a helicopter right over to the area and discovered the crime scene.
Billy, just look at the crime scene. You know, you've seen this stuff. Phil and I've seen this stuff. You look at this crime scene. You've got two vehicles there. There's bullet holes all over the place. It looks like some sort of, like Scarface movie. And it's just something you'd see out of like Breaking Bad. There's all these people dead in the desert. You got vehicles there. You got there was one picture I saw with all the little evidence markers where all the bullet shells were, and it looked like a scene out of some sort of it was a wild shootout. And there, you're looking at that going, yeah, this had to be narcotics. Who would use this much firepower to wipe out these people other than competing, drug gang, organized crime, whatever you want to call it, drug cartel? It's all the same idea. That's who. Anybody that had any other thoughts other than that, I don't know what they were thinking.
The other thing was, Mike, I have no doubt, and the police haven't said this yet, that this was a gun fight.
Yeah.
And one team lost big time,
Mhm.
to the tune of 6 individuals were killed. But if someone was going into the desert to do this drug deal, they were not going in unarmed. They were
right.
armed too, except they were probably outgunned by this team of desperados. I guess you could call them. We're going to try to pull that picture up here again. This team right here, they were much better armed than their victims. And again, they're two sets of brothers, and they're in the trade. They're in the marijuana grow trade, and it's a violent business. And no doubt the victims, and again, it's a tragedy. They lost their lives. But I think that people that go into the drug trade, they know the risks involved, and they know that they are risking their lives in order to do that type of work. So it's hard for me, seeing what I've seen in my police career, to be sympathetic when something like this happens, when they fully understand the risks.
I know there was another question. Brian, go ahead.
Yeah. Did this appear to be a scheduled meetup? And if so, what was supposed to happen? Or does this look more like an ambush?
Brian, maybe all of the above based on evidence we're looking at. But again, once the DA's office reviews this, and it's certainly my hope after we get through the preliminary hearing and a number of things, we'll be able to give it a little bit more information to the group with specificity. That I'm not sure of. Do we know, Mike?
I don't think we're comfortable speaking to that at this point in the investigation.
Sure, were these legal U.S. citizens?
So a couple of the people that we identified in terms of the victims may be nationally from Honduras. We're not able to, we're working with the consulate right now to make that determination. We're not sure.
A follow-up to Emily's question. So you search warrants in those multiple locations. Is it accurate to say that those search warrants were issued at those grows? Where were the suspects arrested?
The suspects were arrested on, I would describe it as a compound. It was close to a grow that was being formed but wasn't active yet. A lot of the areas that we were dealing with were adjacent to marijuana grows, but the search warrants themselves, none of them were hit at a grow site.
Can you say if any of those suspects had prior criminal activity or anything on the record?
Not at this point in the investigation. We're still working through all that.
It's just 5 or are there more?
I believe the 5 that we have are the 5 responsible for the crime. I don't think there's anybody else who we would say is responsible for the crime out there.
As best you can, you immediately got leads. What were these leads, and what was the motivation from whoever was calling you guys?
I would love to be able to speak to that, but really that's definitely part of the investigation that the DA is going to have to review, and that's part of the ultimate adjudication of this that we need. And it's really, we can't release that type of information right now.
Sheriff, I have another follow-up question for you. I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like that you do think we're all going to visit 6 people, but how many other murders were going on because of these illegal grows in your areas?
So I just speaking to San Bernardino County, now, obviously, anytime you have mass 6 people that are murdered, I mean, that's shocking to your conscience, let's be honest. But I can tell you that since we've been investigating illegal marijuana grows, a number of body dumps and things have been related to this across our county. And to give you an exact number, I'm sorry I don't have that, but it isn't an anomaly. The anomaly here is the amount of people that were murdered, of course. And this is a problem. And this is a problem that's not really being talked about.
You're hearing from
So this I love this sheriff. He's right on. He doesn't pull punches, and the district attorney obviously doesn't want a lot of information going out there because this is ongoing organized crime.
Right.
This is undoubtedly related to cartels. This is undoubtedly related to illegals crossing the border. All right, those five individuals. He didn't say. He just said we're checking, but they're Honduran nationals, so they're not here illegally. All right, they're waiting to go back to get their visa.
Right.
If you believe that, I'll sell you a bridge in Brooklyn. But this is a problem we have in this country, and all the time when we report on this, I always have someone in the chat going, "Don't get political." How could we report on this without getting political? This is a horrific issue. Our country is not defending the border. People are pouring past the border every single day. And this 6 murders is part and parcel to that policy.
Billy, there's just too much money in the trade here for people not to come, especially with an open border. People have risked their lives in the past trying to get here. But when we actually had enforcement, our Border Patrol agents are clerks. They didn't sign up for the job to be a clerk. And giving people a pass to say, come back in 2 years and you'll get your hearing.
Your hearing, yeah.
Yeah, your hearing, right. Like they're going to come back. This is the drug trade. We talked about Savannah Soto, remember, Matthew Guerra in San Antonio, and people were shocked and upset that a pregnant woman could be shot. Well, this is the drug trade. This is the life. You lead the life. These people are leading the life, and they know it's a lot of cash, but it's also a lot of danger. These guys that got killed, they may have done some really nasty things themselves in the past. And you live the life of a warrior. You die. You live by the shield, the sword. You die by the sword. I feel sorry for their families, but for them, you and I have seen what the narcotics trade in New York City could do to people, getting shot to death all over the place, and the terror that people have to live with in their neighborhoods. This is a plague, and this is how it is played out. So if this shocks people, I'm glad for it. It needs to be shocking to people, and they need to realize there are severe consequences to how they vote. When you vote for this sort of thing, this is what you get.
Mike, it seems that police in some of these border cities, they got to almost be like the army. That's how dangerous their job is. And they're coming up against weaponry that we used to see in New York City in the 90s, and the weaponry, these guys, I think they took 8 guns off that scene. And I would be interested to know how many guns were inside the vehicles of the people that were killed, because surely this was a gunfight. This was not a one-sided, them getting shot. There was a gunfight at this location. That's why I said at a number of times in us covering the case, I'd love to know the different types of shell casings that were recovered on the scene, which would be indicative of several different weapons being fired. So yeah, let me just play a little bit of this, and then
hoping to deal a striking blow to these illegal marijuana grows. They've really exploded in desert communities.
Christina Gonzalez giving us the inside look at the dangerous operation you'll see only on Fox 11.
Sheriff's Promise search warrant!
Yeah.
San Bernardino County Sheriff serving search warrants at illegal marijuana grow houses in desert communities near Barstow. Hidden behind reinforced fences and tall sand berms, there are structures packed with marijuana plants and processed product. How much does this go for?
$1,000 a pound. once it gets back east, triples in value.
San Bernardino County has seen an explosion of illegal grows, especially in desert communities like Newberry Springs.
1,205 known illegal cultivations, and my best estimate is probably at least another 1,000 that we're not aware of yet.
Investigators saying the illegal grows are run by cartels from Mexico, even China, who bring in workers illegally across the border.
Coming out.
This group, originally from Laos, say they came from Wisconsin a week ago.
Here to find job.
What did they tell you about this job?
For trimming and stuff.
She says she just got here before dawn from Sacramento. She's from the Dominican Republic, and he is from Mexico. There is no other field work, he echoes the others. The conditions some of these field people are living in are horrendous. You can see the outside. Follow me in here. Now, I wish you could smell this because it's the smell of urine. It's the smell of decay. And take a look in here. This is where these people are living at.
You got to remember that for a lot of these people, the situation that they may be coming from, this is a better life for them.
But life is getting worse for the residents in these communities where some are moving out and those staying say they are afraid.
They walk around with guns to intimidate the local folks here.
Local farmers growing legal crops like this pistachio field next to one of the grow houses are suffering as their water is taken with non-permitted wells tapping into the local water sources. Electricity, that's also stolen in dangerously rigged up setups with cables running all over. Now, if the plants have enough buds and they're ready to harvest, they actually have to cut everything down and take it with them. 4 warrants later, deputies seize almost 4,000 plants and over 1,000 pounds of processed product valued at almost $3 million. They also arrest 14 people who are cited for misdemeanors, a pet peeve for San Bernardino Sheriff Shannon Dykes.
With Prop 64, it took illegal, not legal, illegal cultivation from a felony to a misdemeanor. And when you have a $500 fine, and on some of these, we call them plywood grows, the small ones, they make $1 million. The fine is negligible. So we're working with the county. We're talking about a per plant ordinance in terms of a fine and hit people in the pocketbook to drive this out of our county.
In San
Unbelievable, right? It's like, how many times does government make law enforcement's job so much harder because of bad law, bad legislation, bad decisions? And once, as I said, once they pass it, they'll never fix it because that takes too much work for them. No, just let law enforcement deal with this.
And it would have to be an admission that they made a mistake, and no one's going to admit that they made a mistake. You know, you see the no cash bail in New York, or we had the George Floyd race riots in New York, and then you see people being arrested and let out after like an hour while the riot is still going on. They're arrested and they're just released, and you wonder why they're going on, why these riots are going on. Well, there's nothing to stop them. We've pretty much decriminalized criminal conduct. The moment you take something like robbery, burglary, assault, and you drop it from a misdemeanor to a felony to a misdemeanor, you've now, as a politician, have now put a target on every single person and every single establishment, every single shops, stores on their back. And because the people can go in there wilding, grabbing, assaulting people and grabbing things, and they know nothing's going to happen to them. And this is what you do. These decisions are made at a very high level. I'm just shocked that the people, in this case, people of California, fell for it. They fell for the bill of goods that was sold to them. Sadly, it's really sad.
It is very sad. Let me play a little bit of this here. If it'll play. Having a problem. I'll remove it from the screen. It's not playing right now. Here we go. Of course.
Recreational pot, but that doesn't mean the black market is dead. And And investors overseas are taking notice. My next guest writes in Politico, quote, Chinese investors, owners, and workers have emerged in recent years as a new source of funding and labor for illegal marijuana production. Let's bring in Natalie Ferdig. She's a federal cannabis policy reporter for Politico. So when did we start to see this boom in Chinese-funded marijuana farms?
Growing in the last few years. Oklahoma is currently the core of this growth that we're seeing, but it's also existed in small amounts in California and Oregon for potentially decades. There's a lot of questions, though, I want to be clear about where this is all coming from, about who exactly is involved in this, and about how far up the chain this goes in terms of, does the Chinese Communist Party actually know that this is happening or not?
And why go into the illegal part of the business, since you could be legit?
Well, you actually have to be an Oklahoma resident in order to get a license in Oklahoma. So that may pose a problem for someone who is coming very recently from China, which could be happening.
So amazing, right? So showing that the Chinese are coming here to set up, and probably they finance the illegal marijuana growers, or as we said earlier, they own the land, they lease the land,
Right?
And they also bring workers in to work through the marijuana trade. It's all comes back to the border.
Right. And this is the result of the border. It's the result of California's pie in the sky idea that they're going to right a social wrong and make marijuana, pretend marijuana is like the marijuana trade is like cigarettes, and it's and there's not going to be any sort of illegal criminal activity. Really? All right. And this is what you get. And there's no going back. There's no politician that'll say, we got to correct this. You get the San Bernardino Sheriff Dyke, he's like, all we want, one of the most important things is to change the proposition from the part about the changing, downgrading it from a felony to a misdemeanor, or change the penalty part from $500 for one instance to $500 like per plant. Not big changes. You can still have some of the pie in the sky idea, but actually make it work for everyone and take the burden off law enforcement that cannot keep up with this industry, because it's so profitable and it takes so long to prosecute these cases, and there's really no incentive for the Chinese or people coming across the border not to do this. As the reporter said, these people here in America living in these farms and this is really slave labor, indentured servitude, but it's better than what they had. There's no disincentive for them to do this. It's all incentive for them to do it. And it's our own fault.
Folks, if you're looking for a great attorney in the New York metropolitan area, then Joe Murray is your man. Joe's a retired NYPD police officer who is now an attorney. You can reach Joe on his cell phone at 718-514-3855. Email him at joe@jmurray-law.com, or go on his website, jmurray-law.com. Not only is Joe a fantastic attorney, but he's a huge supporter of the Police Off the Cuff podcast, and we really appreciate Joe supporting our podcast and everything he's done for this podcast.
2021, the I-Team toured the high desert by helicopter with the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department.
This is just so great.
Greenhouse after greenhouse with what law enforcement say are illegal marijuana grows, big and small. From the air and on the ground, the sheriff's marijuana enforcement teams, or METs, are busy trying to eradicate these illicit operations. It's painstaking work, spanning hundreds of thousands of acres. armed with search warrants, bulletproof vests, and clippers. The MET targeted 8 different illegal grows on the day the NBC4 team shadowed their operation.
I'm 5'8", so that gives you a sense of how tall these plants are. And if brought to maturity, each one would be worth about $1,000. And you can see there are hundreds in this one greenhouse.
In the last year, our marijuana enforcement teams, they served a total of 411 search warrant for illegal marijuana grows. And we're just talking a 365-day period. Discovered 14 honey oil labs, recovered 655,000 marijuana plants, 74,000 pounds of processed marijuana, and $370 million.
It's big business with new illicit operations sprouting daily. Deputies told us scouts in the area spread word about the sweeps. We encountered only one person on site. I was just working, is what this man told deputies. But tending an illegal grow is just a misdemeanor with a fine of only $500. We spotted the drilling of illegal wells, endangering the already limited desert water supply, open chemical pits, dangerous pesticides, and the illegal trucking of water.
The majority of people that I have stopped driving these vehicles have either not been licensed at all or not had the proper license to drive the vehicle.
You'll recall this deadly accident in Victorville that killed 3 girls walking on the side of the road. The hit-and-run driver, believed by many in the community to be connected to an illegal grow. And the latest murders in Adelanto are not the first deadly attacks connected to illegal marijuana. In the fall of 2020, 7 people were murdered in Aguanga in what deputies described as an illegal grow and processing operation. That crime remains unsolved.
We've unleashed a plague in this California, and the plague is
the illegal marijuana trade.
market of marijuana and certainly cartel activity.
Voters approved legalizing pot in California with Proposition 64, but it also downgraded illegal cultivation from a felony to a misdemeanor.
There's really no difference between 6 plants and 1,000.
6,000, a million. It's all the same. It's just a misdemeanor in California.
In fact, in the 6 other Western states that have legalized recreational marijuana, illegal cultivation remains a felony with serious fines and jail time.
Illegal cultivation. I guess they don't want you stealing that water, right?
Right.
If California's lax rules draw a dangerous element to places like the high desert.
One of our neighbors got shot at only because they were picking up trash on their property that came from an illegal grow.
Now, that neighbor did not want to be identified back in 2021 because he was worried about what could happen to him and his family. But I spoke with him this morning, and he says the Lucerne Valley has seen marked improvement thanks to the sheriff's marijuana enforcement teams. He credits San Bernardino County Supervisor.
Good.
Unbelievable. So, but getting back to when we first started reporting on this case, when they did have the 6 murders in the desert, the news knew all about this, yet they reported what they reported. I'm like baffled by that. They knew this was going on, yet they were like, this mystery. You're like, well, is it me, Mike, or is that ridiculous?
It's ridiculous because they know, they're not stupid. They're deliberately not saying it's tied to the marijuana trade. They don't want to say it. They can't stand to face the optics and say, yeah, we've brought this on ourselves as voters here in California. The people may have been misled about the fine print, as the sheriff said, about downgrading illegal cultivation from a felony to a misdemeanor. The fines being only $500 for an entire plant, whether you have 1 million marijuana plants or 1. If it's illegal, it's illegal. We're going to charge you $500. So you might as well have 1 million plants. Why would you only have 1?
Right.
They don't want to use the term. This is silliness that we can't. They are self-policing and making sure that they don't use any terms or give the public any idea that they know better, that this is actually a marijuana marijuana industry crime. They didn't want to do it. They can't do it. And that's misleading the public. And that's disingenuous. And they ought to be ashamed of themselves for that.
Absolutely. From the chat, Row C, just joining, but have known about the cartel infiltrating Northern Cali where a lot of weed is grown. And I believe it's when illicit fentanyl started to put into it. Can only trust dispensary weed. Well, that's people don't want to pay for dispensary weed because it's 15% more with the tax. But
Yeah.
Janine Dove, this is crazy. I live in Washington, so I know what it's like. But California, that's bad. In Washington, it's a felony.
Should be.
Fuzzy Doxy, woke news. Yeah, they just don't want to report the truth, and that's disturbing because, the news is supposed to shine the spotlight on bad things that are happening. And if they don't do their job, we're not getting a good indication of what's going on. So, Mike, that's going to be our report for this evening. And we want to sort of tie that into just show the preamble to this, that this has been an ongoing problem in San Bernardino. Does this for years. That's why it's so baffling to me that the news didn't report early on what this could have been, and they just don't want to report it,
Yeah.
And I don't want to dwell on that because
No.
we reported it what we thought it was, and it's going to continue unless they change the laws here. Your final thoughts?
Yeah, Billy, as we saw in the video, one gentleman who had talked to the reporter saying there has been progress made in San Bernardino County. There had been progress made because he felt that the eradication program by the sheriff was effective. This is the kind of partnerships you can have, and this is kind of the effect you can have if you've got strict law enforcement. You have eager, law enforcement. You've got the public support behind you, and you do it. And you can, and with a few changes of law, you could help. But it has to be a partnership between the politicians, the public, and law enforcement. And if it happens, you can actually have a pretty good, maybe working, functioning, safe marijuana law like they actually probably originally intended in 2016. But, whenever you get these propositions that are sold to the public, for anyone out there, if you ever in your state have that sort of thing, read the fine print very carefully to make sure you know what you're voting for.
100%. Folks, we're like 62 from 60,000. So we need 62 subscribers to hit 60,000. So if you're not subscribed, you have the incentive. You want to be one of the people that make us go to 60,000 and past that, because that's our goal for 2024, to reach over 100,000. I think we could do it. We're catching on. We got the wind behind the sails. So thank you guys for tuning in tonight. I'm Bill Cannon from Police Off the Cuff. Have a great night, and God bless.
Good evening, everyone.
One episode just ain't enough.